Hey everybody, welcome to Maps Are Dead with Mike D. I'm really excited today. I got Jonas Fridrichsen with me today. He's the VP of Sales for Thrive AP. Jonas, thanks for taking the time to jump on here with me.
My pleasure, Mike. Good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, we've never actually met, which is kind of fun. The first couple episodes, we've recorded about 10 of these so far. They're all people I know, but you actually know my chief of staff, Destry, and she was like, Jonas would be a good conversation. So she kind of has a high bar for both of us. I was like, I don't know if it's going to be that great or not.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
But let's dive in. So one of the things, again, the idea of the whole podcast is maps are dead, meaning that, maps are basically useless unless you're trying to go somewhere someone else has been. And so it's this idea of we're now reaching places in the world, everything from economics to artificial intelligence to working from home and working remote and post-COVID and all of that, in that maps don't really go the places we're going. We've kind of run off the map in some ways. And so one of the conversations is, how might someone use CliftonStrengths to figure out how to navigate moments? So I literally know almost none of your story, Jonas. So if it's okay, what we'll do is we'll unpack your top 5, but throughout that, I probably will ask you questions and things that you have navigated, and which of these has stood out to you as you've kind of made those transitions.
Yeah, it's great.
Is that okay?
It's great.
Had you ever taken Clifton Strengths before?
I have not. I've done. I mean, obviously Gallup is familiar with the brand, but no, I've never done CliftonStrengths. I've done Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and all that other stuff, but Strengths was a little bit different, but enjoyed the process, and
Nice.
I'm glad to hear that I'm those 5 things, I think.
You're fine. Yeah, these are the 5 I got you up here on the board. I think my assistant sent them over. Relator, Achiever, Context, Arranger, and an election. We'll hit those. Jonas, you're VP of Sales. How long have you been? Talk to me about your current role, what you do. I know you've got a family. Give me the headlines of, if this is professionally, this is what my life looks like. Personally, this is what my life looks like.
Yeah, so been in kind of the healthcare world for 15 plus years, mostly in SaaS, predictive analytics, tech, process automation. Right now, I'm in a tech-enabled educational services company. Always kind of been on the growth side of the house. Grew up in sales roles. Been VP growth, chief revenue officer, VP sales. So anything in that marketing, sales, business development world is what's kind of contextualized for me. It's a game more than, I mean, the athletic correlation is a little bit trite these days, but it's true. It's the closest thing to gamemanship and fun and stimulating and challenging, and I tell my team, like, it's the game of life. It's rejection and heartache and stress and pressure and victory and defeat and all that stuff kind of rolled into a job. So I think that's what's attractive to me.
And as a kid, were you into games? Was puzzles a thing? When you look back, this is the obvious track, because just so you know, your profile is very interesting for someone who ends up on the revenue side of the house. So I'm going to love to unpack that, because it's very non-traditional for someone to end up in the gamification of sales and engagement and growth.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm an introvert by nature, right? Which is a little interesting for most people. Associate sales as the gregarious, the life of the party. I'm not that, but I enjoy studying people. I enjoy understanding motivation. I understand, I like getting under the hood and understanding why something motivates or why you've labeled something as a problem. I just think there's a and we'll get to intellection, but just the genuine curiosity is kind of what's driven a lot of my formation. And like a repetitive job that can take 30 years, and you show up and turn the lights on, and it's the same thing every day. It's boring, right? I want the cards to flip in front of my face every couple weeks, and I think this type of role affords you that type of stimulation.
And did you know, was it, because especially thinking about you doing sales in healthcare, that especially makes more sense, especially with context in an election, you're selling a thoughtful thing, right? You're selling education and digital and platforms and all these, you're not selling something singular. It's very multifaceted, I would imagine. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's complex, and there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, if you've woven in and out of the healthcare system, as most people have, it's a big patchwork Frankenstein mess, and there's a lot of improvement opportunities, but there's also, obviously there's a very humanistic side of this too, in terms of helping people get better and making right diagnoses. And it's challenging, rewarding, and complex and frustrating, but ultimately you do see an impact on the patient interaction, patient care, and quality, and that's something that's driven me since day one.
That's great. And you've, professional career-wise, you're VP of sales now, and you just said you have a team. Do you have what's the difference between, so you have a team now, what's your organization, what's your team, or however we'd say it, look like right now?
Yeah, so I've managed, I've had 90 people roll up to me before. So I've managed big teams, small teams. It's less about team size. It's usually more about kind of the stage of the company and kind of where you're at in your career and what motivates you and what you mentioned. I have a family, like your life stage and where you want to tuck into. So I'm on the smaller company size. If you look at everywhere I've been, I'm probably at the lower end of the spectrum in terms of size, which is actually something that I've wanted. Come off roles where I've had, like I said, a lot of people, and there's a lot of challenges that comes with. Got a team of about, I would say 7 now, trying to grow that to 10, 12 by the end of the year. And then we'll see where we're going from there. But small team right now allows me to kind of dig and focus on the fundamentals and lay a foundation, and frankly recruit the people that I want in the spots versus inheriting a bunch of 70 people that I didn't vet, I didn't interview, I didn't hire. So it was absolutely there was a method to the madness. I certainly wanted to go smaller with this role, and I've really been enjoying it so far.
One of the things I spend a lot of time with revenue officers and their teams and sales teams. One of the things we find is that it can be a real challenge for high-performing salespeople to become sales managers, VPs of sales. Right? We often say the worst thing you can possibly do is promote a salesperson to a sales manager role. But typically they get capped out on compensation, and so we're often saying, hey, you know what? You need to change your structure. Let your best salesperson be a salesperson and compensate them saying everyone to leave. But your sales manager, it's going to be a different mix. How was that for you? That space of going, selling myself versus teaching, leading, holding people accountable to outcomes to sell.
Yeah, so, since I was 30, I had I'd say I had an aspirational pivot sometime in college, right? But since I was about 2nd or 3rd grade, all I wanted to do was teach and coach. That's all I wanted to do with my life is, to teach, American literature or, Western Civ or what, something in the social sciences, and then I wanted to coach sports.
Where did that come from, Jonas? Where did that come from? What's the source of that?
Yeah, I mean, what I think it is I had a lot of, I don't want to say a ton of mentors, but some of the ones I had early on, right? Teachers that made an impact, coaches that made an impact. I saw the reach, and I saw the ability to kind of get through to people on a level that that even friends and family weren't able to get through when you have that kind of objective distance from a person, right? I'm not necessarily invested in the outcome. I don't want you as my child to personally succeed. I want the team to succeed. And I can have some level of objective distance from you as a person. I think you can get in someone's head a little bit easier when it's a mentor role or a coach role or a boss or a teacher. That objective distance allows you to do some unique things with putting people on paths, setting bars that other people can clear when you don't have that relational bias that I think a lot of normal relationships have. So I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was the level of influence that those folks had when I was really young was something that I wanted to aspire to be. I realized there wasn't going to be a ton of bread to win, maybe going down that path. So I made a little bit of a career pivot. But I had an intrinsic motivation to lead and to coach and to bring people along. And when you have lone wolf salespeople that are really good at selling but want to be left alone, and they're super high performers, then that was me to some degree, but I also always had this, and I had a mentor, I've had coaches, leaders in certain roles that they did things that I thought were super interesting. And I think it's both intellectual curiosity, but it's also a challenge. Like, could I do that if I pushed myself?
Yeah.
And I did. You're exactly right. Just because there's a reason why Michael Jordan's not leading the basketball team, or Peyton Manning's not calling plays, right? It's
right.
There is a hard transition between top individual performer and leader, but I always had that that intrinsic drive when I was really little to be, like I said, a figurehead in people's lives.
That's great. Just because I love it any chance we just shout out people who matter. Was there anybody in particular, teacher or coach, in those window of times that you're like, this person was the first person I was aware of being that model of influence with perspective, and it kind of started me on the path to discover that?
Yeah, see, I had a couple teachers growing up that were I would say more tuned into things like literature, storytelling, connecting dots between a kid's kind of vibrant internal life with stories that were 200 years old, and drawing bridges and parallels between those things. I thought that was fascinating. Those teachers really stood out to me. I had a couple high school coaches, football, that it was less about the meathead jock rah. It was more about the emotionality of the game, and trying your best because it's a team sport, and your running back depends on you to block a little bit harder, and really kind of drawing the emotional connections to sport. And then, college, you always have your quirky professors that show up in Hawaiian shirts, hungover, whatever it is, that say this one thing or recite this one sana that really kind of like blows. Well, I had hair at the time, blew my hair back at the time. I would say teachers and coaches stood out, but really it was kind of in that realm that just made me really, really fascinated at how they're able to get through to people.
When you first step into sales and you're starting to sell and you're finding success, because as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about context and I'm thinking about a ranger and some of these things that we'll talk about here in a second, but I like getting some of your story. Did you find, what were the keys to success for you when you get a sale, when you start to realize, because you make a pivot, you know what, love this, not going to be able to make a living on it, need more resource, going to go into sales. When did you realize that you could make connections between a client's need and something you're selling, and you were good at it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a little trite, Mike, again, but like it is that intellectual curiosity, right? Like, if you have a set mindset and someone comes in with a certain problem, and I've got one hole to dig and there's one tool to use, asking why a couple different times, and really trying to understand context and point of view and why it is the way it is, and treating it more like mental chess than, a lot of sales training is just, it's terrible because you're trying to roboticize it and turn it into a script and just do it this way. And it's not that. It's jazz. You're feeding off of each other, and you're playing a part based off of what they just played. And it's all to kind of unearth, hey, have you thought about doing something a different way? And I don't think I was particularly skilled one way or the other. I think I just had the mental dexterity to kind of ebb and flow with wherever the person wanted to take me. But it was all rooted in that intellectual curiosity. Like, I want to understand why. And once I understand why 5 layers deep, I'm able to make those connection points back to a novel idea or a product that might be able to help. And it wasn't, I don't feel like it was anything more unique than just being curious and wanting to understand.
Yeah, and not everyone is, though. What's fascinating is there's one of Gallup's books, Strengths-Based Selling, one of the things they call out when they analyzed and researched high-performing salespeople is there are a couple of different factors, which I typically hit a couple of them. One of them in particular is the customer had to feel understood, and the salesperson had to be self-driven. So there's 2 elements. So sometimes, though, being understood meant, they had high, so the salesperson who's very successful would have high relational themes or individualization or empathy, and then have something else to be self-driven. But what is interesting is I'm listening to you talk. the intellectual curiosity about the customer's problem.
Yeah.
The context part of you that says, well, hey, tell me how this started.
Yeah.
I can see how you would create in people this feeling of, oh, especially with Relator at number one, I care about your problem so much. I actually don't want you to gloss over the background. Tell me the whole background. So suddenly
right.
they're confronted with
exactly
somebody who feels utterly understood. Does that make sense?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Empathic, like listening, and like
Yeah.
I said, it wasn't to me. I really like we're talking about objection handling with the team, right? Someone brings in
Right.
like, oh, politics just showed up. There's a power differential, and so like that's a fascinating wrinkle to me. Like that's something to solve for. That's not a we're delayed 3 months now. It's there's
Right.
a layer that's going to be easy or like interesting to punch through. Like that was always my mindset was okay, well let's dig into that and let's see if we can work around that and like discovery, understanding, empathic listening, like those just kind of came natural to me.
And even when, the example of the objection or the confusion of politics or power dynamics come up, even in that, as you describe it, it's the arranger juggling piece where you're like, the arranger is an air traffic controller. They're juggling airplanes in the air. I always say arrangers have very simple, air traffic controllers have very simple and complicated jobs. Planes in the air should get to the gate. Planes in the gate should get to the air. Nobody should be dead. And so, but the variables are astronomical that you're juggling.
Right. Yes,
and arrangers basically do that. And so for you, you're going, I'm still getting to the sale, but it's actually fun to go, okay, how high do I throw this ball of politics in the air and see what comes down?
Exactly.
And so part of that game of like, I've gathered the context, they're throwing in new things. You're like, oh, I can keep juggling. Just give me enough time. I'll throw these in the air. You want to throw in a chainsaw? Great. We can do that with some oranges and a Frisbee. And so it kind of works out in some ways. What is interesting is you may find with some salespeople, instead of, because you seem to be embodying, for me, what comes up as I'm listening to you, you embody a key concept, which is the idea of success is often in finding your ability to be resilient, not resistant.
Right.
And so a ranger gathers the data and then figures out how to get multiple ways to get still to a certain outcome. But they're able to juggle and be resilient. If you have salespeople who have achiever, responsibility, or strategic, which are themes that aren't on your list, they usually categorize the targets they should be resistant to. What's the thing I say when politics come up? What's the thing I say when they say this? And they'll catalog almost scripts. Right. And so for them, their default is be responsive to a thing where you're going, actually, you have to play with it. It's more flexible. And so they may struggle with it and go, hey, how do you adapt a little with your ranger pieces and lean into being resilient more than being resistant to selected targets? Do you find that at times?
That's very well said and articulated quite nicely. I resonate quite a bit with that. Another concept with resilience, and I've talked to Aaron about this, Destry's husband, is layering in this concept of buoyancy, right? Resiliency is just that you're able to work around and you come back, but buoyancy is actually the rate of comeback, right? The further you're pushed down, the quicker you react to being pushed down, right?
Yeah.
So there's a speed element with buoyancy that you don't often get with resilience, and that's what I talk to my team about. It's like, let's be buoyant. Let's not just be resilient. Let's be buoyant. Yeah. Be able to be acute and deft, being able to navigate all these things that get thrown at you. Because to me, that's the fun. And I don't mean to understate it. Like, it's a challenge for a lot of people, and it's stressful for a lot of people. That's the enjoyment piece for me, is being able to navigate around all these things. I think it's an interesting exercise to take part in.
Yeah, and something else that really strikes me about with your profile with context in an election is, one thing I like to say is, I always say to my coaches, coach your clients to perspective first before you coach them to action.
Very true.
The ability to be in a moment but create distance. So you have to go, okay, I hear all that, hear all these emotions, but have a distance from it where this actually has nothing to do with me.
Yes.
Even while you're in the receiving end of it, unhappy customer or passionate customer or scared customer, it can often be translated. Our brains will obviously make things about us for survival. So we default into, how do I respond? What buttons is it pushing for me? But the intellection context part that is thoughtful, intentional, and automatically requires time to deconstruct, it seems to me it'd be interesting, I don't know if it's true or not for you, you may find it allows you more distance than most. So while others are feeling that challenge right here, the person said this and they feel it right, I've got to deal, they're talking to me, I have to deal with it right now. You may actually feel that filter where you're like, they're talking towards me, I'm going to pick and choose which thing I'm going to respond to.
That's right.
Because you have more distance because of your thoughtful process.
That's exactly right. And like I've always had, I'm not a big like, hey, your kid's at a softball game this weekend. Tell me how it went. Like I'm not a big. I mean,
chit chat.
No. To a degree that it's a horrible joke and detrimental to my social life. Like I'm not a small talker. I'm not great at parties. Because I want to get 4 layers deep and I want to understand things at a molecular level. And it's not like I like taking apart things and seeing how I work. It's more of that intrinsic. Help me understand why you think the way that you do. Like that is a fascinating exercise to me.
Totally. And because I'm going to walk through some of these as we kind of chat, and I'm going to dive into some of these as we go. But you're talking about relators, so it just fits so well. I describe these in a bubble, but the reality is CliftonStrengths themes don't work alone. They actually work in pairs and combinations. And in fact, it's much better. They're not in order even, so it's not like number 1 is number 1. It's better to think of them as ingredients you have in your cupboard, and you simply have them in greater quantities in descending order. So you got a whole bunch of flour and sugar with her later. Achiever, probably milk, context bread. And so in decreasing quantities, but actually how you mix them completely depends. So I'll describe some of these, but I'm describing them in a bubble. They work different in yours. And in fact, I was looking a little bit through your profile, and yours actually skew really interesting. Because some of the descriptions, when Gallup custom writes your report, they give you this interesting mix of past and future simultaneously. A brain that snaps both directions. Your profile on paper, context is history, you're thoughtful. But when I read your relator, like a line item 2 was, you actually like people who are thoughtful about the future, not just you like people.
Well,
and so that's a big difference.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a little
What's interesting is the relator, there's it's a relational theme. There's 4 domains of CliftonStrengths themes, influencing, executing, strategic thinking, and relating. Relators prefer real conversation over small talk. And so relators do this thing where they project intimacy and safety. And so in fact, they prefer teams of people they've worked with over time. Often I say give relators 6 to 8 people and they can run a company of 1 million. They just don't want too many direct reports. Because core relationship and the relational dynamics of that small group just naturally are easy with you because you can read them authentically, you understand what's going on. What's interesting though is relators project safety. And so you may find, I don't know if this is true for you, but Jonas, you may find that near total strangers tell you too much personal information.
Yeah.
Because relators do this thing where they say, hi, how are you? And our brain goes, oh my gosh, they really want to know. So we overshare. And then you're like, well, I would never say those words out loud, but thanks for sharing. I'm going to go pick up my tacos now. And in the midst of that, I then want to get you to share, not realizing that you actually, relators, they project intimacy and safety, but are actually quite private. In fact, I'll have relators say to me, few people get the label friend.
Right.
Many acquaintances, few friends. Relators have friends who have been vetted and have earned the right to have the word. Does that sound fair?
That's totally fair. And that you're holding the mirror up a little bit. Or at least I feel like you're holding the mirror up a little bit.
Yeah. And so the good news is, no matter what you're going to do professionally and personally, core relationships end up being really important. One of the things that's really useful, though, when it comes to recharging, I'll have relators say, there's nothing more energizing than quality time with people I don't have to explain myself to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's totally true.
And so I would say, just so you know, when things get crazy, if relator is strong for you, when things get busy and crazy, the worst thing you can do is cancel the date night with your wife.
That's exactly right.
And you're busy, because actually the time with someone who knows you, that's life-giving. The time with your friends where you hang out and just watch something and not speak,
exactly right.
That's actually going to be relaxing. And in fact, that will energize for the chaos of, I got to navigate these things and put a plan together. Ignoring the quality, and it can seem frivolous in the action, especially with Achiever, where you have hard work. Your day starts at 0 every day, which I'll talk about in a second. It can go, the struggle of relator Achiever is time with people not talking and not doing is life-giving, but Achievers wake up every day starting at zero, no matter how much they accomplished and what sales award they won the night before.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, are those things diametrically opposed or are they synergistic? Like you could make an argument both ways.
Totally.
No, I think you nailed it. I think you absolutely nailed it, and that's been a little bit of my story for sure.
Yeah. And what can be interesting about so I would say none of these are actually opposed, just know they always flavor each other. And so we pull our themes. I often say, do what you do naturally because you get to do it, not because you have to do it. And so there's the much deeper questions of identity, right? Yeah. There's people who, I don't know who I am if I'm not checking a checklist, versus if you have achiever, I actually enjoy checking a checklist. And so with achiever specific, so relator, they usually lead very well with core relationships 5 to 6. They prefer authenticity over small talk. They might go to a party and talk to 3 people that they know over making random conversation. It's restful to be with people that know them. Strangers, it'll actually take effort. You can do it, but it'll take more effort than it is life-giving. Achiever is an executing theme. People with achievers start every day at 0. They understand timelines. They understand how long a thing will take. The accomplishment and measurement is really important, which may be why sales actually works for you in some ways, is that it is the game of arranger mixed with the measurement of achiever. My effort actually creates an actual result. What can happen is, as a leader, I don't know if this comes up for you, when I coach leaders with achiever, they'll say to me sometimes, the challenge is my team needs affirmation. Especially now, there's more and more research around affirmation and development is the new currency, even more than cash. Affirmation and development of a team will actually get people to stay longer than ever before. But achievers will say to me, I'm really confused. They say I don't celebrate the wins enough. And I'm like, celebrate? Every time I check a box, it's like a party in the box. You know? And so for you, it's satisfying to cross it off. Others may need the awareness. And so what we do is when I'm coaching people, we actually go, hey, what if you added send a note to your team as one of your checklist items? If you're shifting, you have to redefine what the checklist is. When you're selling yourself, getting it done is enough. When you're leading, helping them execute and then helping them be ready to execute again is the goal. It's not just a single task. Yeah. And so one of your items becomes, hey, add my one-on-ones to my calendar, because for achievers, if it's not on the list and doesn't get to be crossed off, it's not real.
That's right. No, it's totally true. So, I mean, my wife, she jokes with me that, like, if there's a task to do, my rate of velocity towards the end of the task increases because I'm pissed off that it's not done. And so I go faster at the end to get it done, right? So because the satisfying cross it off, like I will get faster. If it's an 8-hour yard project, like I'm sweating harder at the end than I am at the beginning because I'm trying
You're a little bit like a horse who sees the barn.
Exactly right. That's exactly how I can see it. We go, and so speed, timelines, what's it going to take? Yep. Those are things I wake up every day thinking about for sure.
Be aware for achievers. People will say to achiever a lot, hey, can't you just rest or stop? Here's the challenge though. Stopping is not restful for achievers.
No.
And so you may find that when it comes to actually recharging, active distraction. And so I'll tell people, the act of actually cleaning a closet on a Saturday morning or cleaning a garage or fixing a fence or repairing a thing is as restful as you just sitting.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And if you're going to be present on your vacations, I tell achievers, if your family gets up at 8 in the morning vacation, you need to get up at 6:30 and do 1 hour of work before them, and then tell yourself you'll do that every day on vacation, because your brain will let you hit pause if it knows the next work period's coming the next morning.
Yeah. There's absolutely that. I often tell my teams too, I would rather be miserable than bored, because being bored is a word stronger than miserable to me. There's nothing. If I'm not engaged, if I don't feel like I'm being used to capacity, if I don't feel like I'm filling a cup somewhere, I'm mildly depressed, despondent, not engaged, not present. It's really bad for me. It's like it's truly detrimental to me if I'm not in something and in something pretty deep.
The ability to feel like you can measure the impact you had. That ends up being really important. If it's not measurable, it's theoretical. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very true.
And so part of what you'll do well, and I don't know who your boss is, but if I was talking to your boss, having seen your profile, one of the things I would say is, hey, when it does come to giving feedback or affirmation, feedback and affirmation for Jonas has to be tied to an outcome. Great job, Jonas, is a meaningless phrase.
What,
you know what I'm saying?
What did I do a great job on? Like what? Yeah, tell me.
Right.
What did I do? Yeah, exactly.
And so part of your gift, even when you're leading then, is the same. Remember that actually feedback and recognition tied to result is impactful for most people, but specifically those with executing themes. Achiever, responsibility, it's naturally more meaningful to them because you actually picked out this outcome had these consequences. Thank you.
That's right.
If that resonates at all.
That's right. No, it absolutely does.
So relators about authenticity, core teams, a relationship, you're naturally going to sell well because people authentically believe you want to know. Achiever, because sales is about mechanics. Like it's about there's certain things you have to do. You take the call, you make the meeting, you get the thing done, you check the list. It's not just grip, grin, and go to lunches and play golf with people. It's hard work every day. Context, though, is one of the more rare themes. It follows the strategic thinking, but context, specifically between context and intellection, I'll differentiate. There's a focus for all the thinking themes. The focus of context is our past informs our future. Mm-hmm. So let me gather background in order to make a plan about the future. And so it's not just about the present. Context understands that background is like a train on a track. And so the context is like a train on the track. And so a train is going a certain direction. It doesn't suddenly make a hard left-hand turn. If it is going to make a turn, it's long and slow, but you'll go back and say, well, wait, where does the train start and where is the train going? Mm-hmm. And so and so you may ask more background than people think you need because they don't necessarily have context.
That's exactly right.
Is that right? Context, one of the things they'll do is context often will ask strangers where they grew up or where they were from. Because even that, where did you grow up, tells you something that will help you frame out this engagement. Does that sound accurate at all?
It is. I mean, it's a mental map for me, and and frankly, sometimes I've been to a bunch of places. Like there's also. I mean, not to go back to small talk, but it gives me something to say if I know something slightly about the place that you grew up from, and it helps me. Like I said, there's also that survival kind of evolutionary instinct where I can expend less brain power if I know exactly where you're from. I can jump, and again, this sounds terrible because it's probably it's bias, right? But I can place you. I have something. I have some mental map about you. If I know, the more information I have, the more context, I can place you accordingly. I could be wrong about that, but that's my evolutionary instinct kicking in, saying like do less work when you can organize information in your head and be able to map someone out in front of you.
Yeah. What's interesting about context is it's usually slow, methodical. I don't want to say slow, but it's intentional and methodical. Gathers information, organizes it a certain way. This whole podcast is about trying to figure out helping people navigate. You're on a track, right? You're being influenced by people who are in thoughtful spaces. They're in literature. They're in other pieces. Context often gets really high marks and goes into either history or law because there's precedent, right? They want to be history professors. They want to be lawyers usually because they love making the argument. You make a shift and you're like, oh, I have a pivot. But here's the question I want to ask in the midst of transition stuff and things. How quickly and how hard of a turn is that? Because context is usually a slow turn. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, yeah, I've got to make this turn. Or was there something where almost like, if you've ever been to a train station when I was a little kid, that was our field trip. You'd go and they put the train on a table and it'd turn it. Like that was a thing. Like you could do that in train yards.
Yeah.
For you, if I'm going to kill my metaphor of context on a track, when it came to that transition, that's a big shift. I'm going to do literature, education, and teach sales. Mm-hmm. Was that a hard turn? Was that a slow path? And one day you realized the track had bent.
Yeah, it was. I mean, as you say that, it's funny. I pivoted to not necessarily pre-law, but I started thinking law school and took the LSAT and was going to go that whole path. And then I got my first job. I guess my first real job out of school was a sales gig to just give me a paycheck until I got to law school. And then I realized, like, I didn't want to be in sales. That's gross, slimy. Could let me pick your pocket while you're not looking. Stereotype. But then they dropped me it was a company that was doing something semi-complex. I was on the low end of the totem pole, but I was like, wait a second, you can provide for your family like a lawyer, but work half the hours, and this is the same kind of intellectual stimulation that I feel like law school would provide. Why don't I just ride this out a little bit? So history, law, that's I think what I'm naturally curious about. But then you drop me in. Out of desperation came enlightenment a little bit. Like I just needed a paycheck to bridge me to law school. Oh my gosh, I kind of like this, and I'm kind of good at it, and I think it checks a bunch of boxes for me.
Looking back, you obviously did it pretty intuitively. I'm assuming this is in your early 20s.
Yeah.
You're out of school. You're kind of intuitively following that path. When you think about the mix of intellectual thought and idealism with the hard reality of I have to provide for a family.
Yeah.
That's an interesting dynamic to walk because you're almost marrying your philosophical with your pragmatic piece. When you navigate your life now, you've changed companies a few times. You've gone from a bigger company to a smaller company. You're making decisions about time you want with family, depending on the age of your kids, how you want to be involved. How aware are you about the things that need to be present for you to feel like this is a clear, easy decision, or this is how I approach those choices?
Yeah, so it was, I think pre-midlife, it was all data and risk mitigation, and things were black and white. And I think now in midlife, there's been enough suffering and heartache and chaos to kind of factor into the decision matrix where your gut plays a more relevant role in the decision matrix than maybe your head did in the past. And it's that life experience, right? You've had to fall down enough, you've had to fail enough, you've had to deal with really, really tragic things and really, really hard things in life, and it all kind of builds up into your gut's on equal footing with your head. So I would just say it has changed. It was hardcore data, pros, cons, percentages, risk mitigation, black, white. Now it's, look, there's a minimally viable amount of variables that I need to see, but then it becomes, I'm going to roll the dice and I'm going to go with my gut based off of what I'm confident in my life, in my life experience, where my gut is way more of a rudder than it was in the past.
Yeah, and it's really true. We often shift. I always say our CliftonStrengths themes are there, but as far as they may change order. They don't really change that much over time. They're finding a lot of stability. The assessment's like 20 years old now. But what I do find is we totally grab different themes as a priority. Whereas achiever would be a priority. Grind, go do it. You may find that relator context, you're like, wait a minute, I have quite a bit of train track right now. Do I like where this train is going?
Right.
Like, how might I make changes? One of the things about context, people with context will often say they hate repeating mistakes. They have no problem making mistakes if it's a learning act, but having learned it, repeating it, that's untenable. Does that resonate?
Very true. That's very true. So, like, if I make a mistake once, it's not. I'm not celebrating. Obviously, I'm a little ashamed. But has been a theme of this conversation. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I can now file that away. If I do it again, then the self-loathing hits, and then I'm pissed, and then I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed and feel guilty. But if I do make a mistake once, I'm really not hard on myself. I'm more like, now I know. And I learned. I didn't lose or I didn't fail. I learned.
Yeah. How do you navigate that as a leader versus, because one thing to navigate it for yourself and have to get that path. It's another thing to navigate that when you're leading people. And again, leading a small team, that might be different than leading a much larger team. You've got a pretty core team of 7, it sounds like right now.
Yeah.
What is that like when it comes to leadership? If context is there for you and you're like, one mistake, fine, multiple, does that push buttons in you? Does the team know that that's a thing? How does that show up for you?
It does. I mean, it certainly does. And like I you know, my mercy meter, my grace meter probably lessens over time if it's the same thing, because it feels like Groundhog Day, right? And then I start to think, but I also, you know, I also I think one of the hardest parts about being a leader is absorbing other people's emotion, right? Warranted or not warranted, whether it's a very legit reaction to something that happened or something that feels completely incongruent with the stimuli. You still got to absorb it, whether you think it's appropriate or not appropriate. And you've got to hold it for them, and you've got to be some type of rock in those scenarios. And so I think, you know, my meter in terms of mistakes or mercy is usually based like what do I know is going on in those people's lives, how long they've been, you know, kind of in the context that I've laid out and my expectations, where did they come from, how many years in the seat have they spent. I mean, there's a big spectrum that I would probably use to rate or
use context of them to decide.
But generally speaking, absorbing other people's emotions that are not your own is one of the hardest parts about being a leader.
Yeah, it's true.
And
figuring out how to use them.
It's knowing how to be effective with them, right? Can I use this? Can I turn this into a motivation? Is this something they just need to sit with and process on their own? Do they need advice? Do they need direction? Knowing how to be effective with the congruent and incongruent emotions is one of those things where I don't know if you ever really master that over time. That's something you're always evolving.
It's a process. Yeah, it's a process. Relators about core team. They know how to do authenticity and build core groups of people. Achievers, it's all about execution, measurability, understanding hard work, and the ability to create outcomes that can be calculated. Context, it's understanding how the past informs the future. It's the organization of information in a way where mistakes are not repeated, and the coalescence of the train, how it's connected, is pretty clear. Arranger, I kind of mentioned briefly. They're a lot more like conductors or air traffic control. What is interesting is that arrangers are kind of juggling, but one of the things that's I find fascinating is arrangers are able to take this very complex thing and make it seem flexible as long as one variable is key, and that is the target. The reason why you can juggle these airplanes from the gate to the air, from the air to the gate, is because the airport doesn't move. Now, you may have backup plans. Right. A plane's coming in and going to Newark versus LaGuardia versus JFK versus Teterboro into New York, it's a different thing. And even you could do Denver to maybe you could get to Omaha. It's pretty close, right? Mm-hmm. But to suddenly go, yeah, we're on our way to JFK, but you now got to divert to Atlanta, that doesn't work. And so clarity about what's being asked. One of the things at CliftonStrengths we talk about is when we do mapping with teams, we have them break into things we call, here's what I bring, but here's what I need. Gallup found high-performing teams were people that didn't have compatible strengths, but they had respect for enough for each other to listen and learn. This is what Jonas brings to the table that I don't. Here's what I bring that he doesn't. So here's what I bring to the table, but then here's what I need. Our Rangers bring flexibility, organization, and execution, but they need clarity about what you want from them. Exactly. Does that sound right?
It sounds exactly right. And I mean, a lot of language, I've used is like, look, it can be a big bore, a small bore, or it can be a rowboat. It can be a tug. Tell me where the lighthouse is. As long as as long as we know where the lighthouse is, like I can navigate around sharks. I can deal with a leaky boat. I can handle the chaos on the journey as long as tell me where we're going, and as long as there's flexibility within the journey, and I can kind of deal with what is thrown at me. But if I don't know where we're ultimately trying to land, I become apathetic and disengaged and frustrated and confused and like, why the hell are we doing this, right? Yeah. So I need I've used that term. I need a lighthouse. I need to know where we're going. I can deal with storms and, like I said, clouds and all of that stuff. I just need to know where we're going.
And I often tell people, if people start to use CliftonStrengths, you can use your CliftonStrengths themes as a dashboard for like where you are. Kind of like, is your engine running too high or is your gas tank low or whatever? For a Ranger, I'll often say, when you start to feel an annoyance at the pit of your stomach, you can't name, it's because your brain is pretty clear. The person asking something of you does not know what they want. Exactly.
It's exactly it. It's just it creates this like existential. Why are we doing this? Like this is wasted effort, energy that can be applied to something a little bit more fruitful. I don't think you know what you're talking about. I don't think you know where we're going, but yet you're trying to lead the ship. That feels like the greatest sin to me, disingenuous.
Right.
This is you're literally wasting people's lives trying to get us to go somewhere that you don't even know. That's the greatest offense to me in the professional world, is that exact thing.
And so in that moment, when you start to sense that, okay, I'm frustrated. Oh wait, they don't know what they want. The trick is to not figure. Is that a lot of people will go, well, I still have to keep juggling. You're not going to be able to juggle the variables without knowing. And so I say, stop trying to juggle and instead actively ask, hey, let's actually stop talking about possibilities and actually go to your comment, what's the lighthouse? And so but most people will kind of be in such a rush. Well, I'll just keep juggling. Oh yeah, they don't know what they want, but I'll just keep juggling. I would actually say, find a way to bring that to much of a stop as you can and go, when I'm feeling that, it's a waste of my energy and time to move forward until I'm clear on the lighthouse.
Yes.
One thing at a time.
That's absolutely it.
You'll hit one more, and then we'll just freestyle talk for the last 15 minutes here. Relator is about core, team, and authenticity. Achiever is about being able to create measurable outcomes. Context, past informs our future. Organized information, kind of in a coherent strategy. Arranger, it's the ability to conduct and organize when the targets are clear. Intellection, if context is thinking, focus on the past. Intellection is thinking about deconstructing to find the core idea. They want to make sure they're pulling on the right thread, not pulling at strings. And so the intellection will think constantly to deconstruct and break it down. But it's interesting, thinking and speaking have nothing to do with each other. Yeah. So people may actually be like, oh, well, surely if you're thinking it, and you're like, no, intellection is to the true introverts, and I don't know if this is true for you, but I have folks with intellection say to me, 99% of what goes on in my head never makes it to my mouth.
Yeah. That's so, oftentimes if I'm engaged in a deep conversation, I think this gets a bad rap because it can feel performative, but you'll hear people say, well, what I just heard you say is, and they want to sound like they're expounding on or building on, or it's a little bit of a subtle one-upper. If you hear me say that, I am trying to get to the root. Like I am trying to synthesize everything that you're saying, and I'm looking for confirmation that I have deconstructed this properly and that I am getting to the root of the essence of what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Right. So it's exactly that. Like if 99% of what is in my head never makes it in my mouth, that's probably a good thing for everyone in my close circle.
For those around us.
For those around me, yeah, for sure.
You may find one other thing people with intellection will often say they can have trouble falling asleep at night.
Yeah.
And so you may find that a notepad by your bed or an iPad by your bed that you can brain dump into before you go to sleep, or if you wake up having solved problems in your sleep, you can capture it. Also, and as a general rule, if you find your mind is spinning on a thought, it is trying to embed it. And so write it down somewhere. Even if you never look at it again, the act of capturing it makes your mind relax because it knows it's been gathered somewhere and it's not left to your brain to hold on to it.
It's absolutely true. Journaling's been big. Like, purge it, get it out, get it, stop. Mm-hmm. It's circling the drain. It's got to land at some point. Get it out. Yeah, no, totally.
And when it comes to communicating and being powerful with your team, like expression, whether it be affirmation or strategy, two things. One, bullet points or talking points in advance of a presentation is usually life-giving and clarifying. The other thing is, I have found that people within election, you're obviously very well spoken in general, but people within election and deep thinking themes, almost like analytical and input, there's something that comes across that's even more deep when you write to us. So even short notes, but because you get to select every word and you're not pressured to have to speak it in front of me, the note of affirmation, the written statement of affirmation is usually incredibly powerful for people within election if you're leading a team, or even, I always say, spouse and partner, kids, post notes on the counter from you are usually pretty transformational.
Yeah, so I should employ that more with my family. I do employ it, or at least I try to employ it at work. Like, I would rather take the time and take a 45-minute well-written email Like a lot of people are like, I have this thought, I need to get it out. It'll take 5 minutes. Let me call you real quick. I hate those conversations. I would rather sit and dictate a 45-minute email that allows me to fully form, process the thought, and click send, and know that someone's going to thoughtfully receive it and read it on the other side. Like, that's a return on investment to me, because there's not a lot of static, there's not a lot of interpretation, it's not word vomit, it's not spitting things by each other. It's let me get it out on the page. And I think actually it saves time if I dictate significantly on the front end of this. So written word is, it's vastly important to me, and it's a tool I try to employ in the professional life. I need to do it more a little bit with my family, but when I do write letters, when I do leave my kids notes, I do think they are, the feedback I get is, wow, that really stood out. And it's a sense of pride, and I should do it more. But I think there's something very, very, I don't want to say intellectual, but something very, very exacting about the written word that most people ignore because they want quick, instant gratification, word vomit. It needs to get ripped out of my soul, man. And in order do I know that it's actually being received well.
Completely. And so what can happen sometimes, I don't know if you have to experience this, but people with your profile like yours, which is about authentic outcomes that have the intended impact. Mm-hmm. The challenge is that I would wonder about, Jonas, if I was talking to you more often, is that there's times where I would wonder, do you ever feel out of sync with the world around you? Yeah. Because yours is so intentional and methodical and it's not rushed. Because you're like, authentic impact that has great intention, that serves a purpose, it requires effort. And in a world that's getting faster and attention spans are getting shorter, you're going, wait, I have the goods you want.
Yeah.
But you're too impatient for it. Do you ever feel that disconnect?
Yeah, I do quite a bit. That's been I think that's probably been a theme with me throughout childhood. Like I enjoy a physical newspaper. I still pick those up at the airport in the morning. I like to flip the thing out and feel it in my hands. It feels more substantive to me than the clickbait. I don't. Yeah. I mean, am I on Instagram? I absolutely am on Instagram, but it's a sugar high. It's cotton candy in terms of information. I want to sit and read long form op-eds. Like it's not, and it's a substantive thing. I get more out of it. I extract more value when it's done the opposite. And I'm in tech. Like I'm a big advancer of innovation and doing things better and faster. And we can talk about AI. We go down all those paths. There's and there's virtue in it. There absolutely is, but there is something where we can't lose our essence in terms of like what makes us authentic, real, connective humans. And I think that's a lot of written word. That's a well-spoken, intentional conversation with somebody. That's a piece of music that you need to bring someone in my office, in my record player. I'm like, I need you to hear this. And I need us to not talk. This is in the background. I need you to sit and listen. I think those things, in a weird way, the currency for those things are getting more valuable because we're losing more of it often. Sure. So those moments can actually have an inverse, meaningful impact because you just don't get it that much anymore.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, do these sound like you, these themes?
Yeah. It's
they kind of resonate.
Now, Enneagram sounded like me too, and Myers-Briggs sounded like me too. So
sure.
It's all like they've all been super helpful and insightful. But you nailed all of them. They all. Well,
and the reason to bring it up is that I think whatever tool works. Ultimately, I say find vocabulary so you can write paragraphs of your own story.
Yes.
Whatever tool you're using, go be with God. It describes you. It doesn't define you. Go ahead and use that. And so just, to kind of pull us in here and kind of not take up your entire afternoon, but this idea of, as I look at this profile for these specifically, it's being able, I would just encourage you when it comes time to make these choices and decisions, when it comes time as a father and as a husband and as a leader, knowing that, hey, you get the best of me when I get to have a mission that I care about that's authentic and real and matters, when I get a core group of people that you want to execute that. And once you give me the target, You let me decide the outcome.
Yeah.
You being micromanaged isn't the best use of you, but a mission that matters and a core group of people to lead, grow, and develop, while giving you the flexibility of, I will meet your deliverable, but let us do it our way.
Yeah.
That control creates this near artistic nature of leadership out of you.
Yeah.
If they'll allow, what's that phrase? Hey folks, remember, home cooking takes time. There's restaurants that are like, no fast food here.
Exactly right.
The art takes time, and it will literally be leadership as art for you potentially, Jonas.
Yeah. No, I heed that call. I really do. I think that makes a lot. It is an art form. It's like going back to early. Like there was a reason why leadership and mentorship and coaching and teaching that has been a call in my heart since I was 8, 9 years old. And I it's not that I had a lot. Like I wanted to be on a pedestal. It just there's an art form. There's a craft to doing that well and right. And I was always drawn to that even from an early age. So no, that absolutely resonates with me.
That's great. Any questions or anything on these that came up when you were looking through your profile or anything I didn't answer? Or it was kind of these lessons?
I mean, I thought the relator was very well articulated because when you read the word on the surface, it's like, oh, he's a people person. It's like, well, I love people.
No.
Small clusters of people, maybe not big, but the take on relator based off the root, the word, I thought was very well articulated. And Mike, as you talked, like, this you're pulling up a mirror, man. I feel like I'm on a therapist's couch right now.
Well, I mean, it happens. I mean, it's I think it's the chance to be authentic and not have to and go, oh, my brain works a certain way, and I can own it, and I can be part of what we talk about. The whole point of using strengths was Gallup found that the more emotionally engaged we were, specifically, the tool was actually created not around psychology, but specifically around a factor. They realized that high performers in their database of all their clients, specifically, quote, were highly emotionally engaged in the day-to-day demands of their job. But when they dove in, emotional engagement was directly connected to how well the job seemed to be instinctual for them. So instinct ended up being key. So then they said, if we could give people language around instinct, specifically thought, feeling, and behavior, and they navigated their life towards that more, getting to use their instincts would go up, emotional engagement would go up, they'd be high performing. And so I call these out, hopefully, more so like language to your instincts, that's all.
Yeah, well, and I would also say, like, you can be, going back to contextualize, if you're instinctually, you feel like you belong, you can have new stimuli, new information. You can be put in really odd circumstances, but if you're instinctually there, if you feel like you belong, that to me, that's nirvana to me. It's because I'm getting new inputs, I'm learning new things, but fundamentally my instincts are aligned. I feel safe. I feel like it's all gleaning, man. It can come. So I think that's a very interesting point. Is if it guides you to your instincts and you're rooted, the whole world can be open to you with all types of new inputs, and that's how you grow. That's ultimately how you grow as a human.
Yep, 100%. Man, an hour flew by. I appreciate taking the time, Jonas.
Yeah, dude. Mike, pleasure to meet you, man. Really excited to be on.
Thanks so much, everybody. See you next time. Thanks for watching Maps Are Dead. If these conversations are helping you rethink your path, do us a favor. Like, follow, and leave a 5-star review. Helps other people find us and helps others find their way. And if today's episode has hit home, if the map you're following doesn't quite feel right, we've got something for you. We call it the navigation brief. Here's how it works. You send us your top 5 CliftonStrengths. We're gonna send you back a custom video with real insights. Where you are, what's holding you back, and how to start moving with more clarity. No fluff, no hype, just truth, direction, and a little shot of momentum. You can sign up at the link in the show notes or in the podcast description. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next episode. Remember, maps are dead, so live courageously.